Well, hello. Here's part 2 of, I don't even know how many parts there's going to be of this introduction to the Enneagram. If you are joining me for this one and you haven't watched part 1, then let me say what we did in part 1 was just do a round through each of the numbers of the Enneagram with descriptions. And it took a little time. And so if you have not had the opportunity to just kind of go through and discover some basic descriptions of each of the 9 types, either by reading one of the books, or if you haven't had a chance to do that, then maybe go back and watch that. However, if you feel like you have a good sense of the 9 in terms of general descriptions, then come on down. And in this session, we'll talk some more about ways that you can help sort out what your number is, and some of the characteristics that can help you delve further, more deeply into different pieces of it. I'm going to screen share here a little bit. Okay, what you see in front of you, I think, is now a picture of the Enneagram as you've seen it and talked about, but now there's a whole bunch more words and lines and arrows and things like that, which may already make you think, oh, it's too much, it's too complicated. However, if you were someone who was thinking, oh, it's just 9 types, how can everybody fit into that? Well, this is the part where you figure out, oh, there's so many options with each number. There are, in fact, so many options. And so hopefully this will actually help you clarify where you think you fit and not feel overwhelming. Take your time with this, and let's see how we can make it work. I have spoken before. Some of you have heard me talk about how the Enneagram is kind of divided up into 3 centers and has a relationship with thinking and feeling and doing. And so you'll see that on this diagram. If you look at the teal lines, you can see that it's divided into 3. And at the top, 8, 9, and 1, there's doing, body, anger, and then 2, 3, 4, feeling, heart, shame, 5, 6, 7, thinking, head, fear. So you see there's the doing and the feeling and the thinking sections. I'm going to have to do a little more explanation around that, around the complicating factor, but it's helpful to think about the fact that each of those numbers have a relationship with either thinking, feeling, or doing in a very particular way. And sometimes they're called the body and the heart and the head center. And there is a relationship. I have said to people who are in the body center, 8, 9, and 1, that in that doing center, that body piece is that you are the ones most affected by moving your body. I mean, yes, all of us need to move our bodies. It's in our health's best interest to exercise. But if you're part of the 8, 9, 1 center, then that means that moving your body can impact how you process information and emotion more than any other number on the Enneagram. You have this relationship with doing and with body. You also have a relationship with anger. And like some 9s and 1s in particular will say, not necessarily, but then you do have a relationship with it. And so we'll explore some of those complications as we come to them. But for some of you, it might be obvious when we divide it up into thinking, feeling, or doing, which one you resonate with most immediately. And that can help you figure out which one you fit best with. It also might help you to know which one you repress. Sometimes with the Enneagram, what you figure out is not so much what you are, but what you aren't. And so it might put some of the things you were thinking on the back burner if you thought, okay, I'm really not that. Here, let me use a couple of other slides to explain it better. This is from Alice Freiling, and she's got a nice chart here. Oh, you can't really see too well the heart and the head and the gut part of the chart. But you can see these different categories. And this might help you figure out how you relate to the head, heart, or gut. Motivated by, she says, heart people are all motivated in some way by image. What will others think? Head people are motivated by strategies. How can I solve this? And gut people, 8s, 9s, and 1s, are motivated by resistance. What is wrong here? So let's just go through the chart and see if that helps you think about it. The focus of attention for the heart looks out to what others want. Focus of attention for the head looks within to what I think. Gut digs into my own opinion. Are some of those starting to resonate with you? Your life perspective. If you're in the heart center, life is a task. If you're in the head center, life is a problem. If you're in the gut center, life is a battle. Wants to, in the heart, fix the problem. In the head, understand the issue. In the gut, control people and circumstances. And I don't mean any of these in a bad way. I'm trying to be non-judgmental about that and just think about which one kind of fits with the way I approach the world. So instinctive responses for each of those triads. In the heart, yes, I'll do that if you want me to. In the head, I don't know about that. I'll have to think about it. And in the gut, no. The heart moves toward people. The head moves away from people. The gut moves against people. I know 9s are like, no, I don't. That's okay. The underlying feeling, this is the thing I said, that everybody has a relationship with this. Like in the heart center, everybody has a relationship with shame. In the head center, everybody has a relationship with fear. In the gut center, everybody has a relationship with anger. Now, what that relationship is that it's difficult maybe, but it's not the same depending on your number. In the heart, we seek attention. In the head, we seek security. In the gut, we seek autonomy. I wonder if some of those categories might help you feel a little more clearly about what center you might connect to. Now, to complicate matters, this is where this makes sense, but also complicates the centers part. I sometimes think I shouldn't start with the centers because sometimes the centers really help you figure out where you belong. And then sometimes the centers make you go, what? I thought I had this figured out and now I don't. But take a look. To complicate matters, 2s and 5s and 8s have an outward orientation to their center, to others' lives or to the world of thought in the case of a 5. 4s and 7s and 1s have a more inward orientation to their center and into their own lives. And 3s and 6s and 9s are particularly tricky because while they attempt to harmonize what's inside and outside, they repress the use of their preferred center. So if you were thinking 3, 6, or 9 before we got to these centers, and now this all confused you, that maybe confirms your choice. Because for a 3, for example, right in the middle of the feeling center, 3s don't really have access to their feelings. 9s who are in the doing center, well, one of the things they have struggled with the most is actually getting to the doing. And 6s who are in the head center are much more comfortable with the feeling and the doing because thinking, well, that just makes them more anxious and more worried. So they try and avoid that as much as possible. So it's complicated, but it's also, that's part of the depth and the value of the Enneagram. I said that every triad struggles with a particular difficult emotion. The gut triad with anger, the heart triad with shame, and the head triad with fear. Now, how you struggle with that is interesting. Like 1s in particular will often say, I don't know if anger is my thing. And yet, sometimes 1s will say, oh, I totally understand the anger piece because I'm angry all the time. And most of the time it's at myself. 1s don't often appear angry. And so sometimes they prefer the words resentment or frustration or annoyance. but there's a relationship. Sometimes they spend a lot of their lives just trying to control anger and get rid of it. In the heart triad, shame has a similar issue, and in the head triad, it's fear. So can you think of a time in your life when you were dealing with the emotion that is kind of associated with your triad? And how did that play out? Now, each of those triads has a relationship with feeling, thinking, or doing. We've talked about that. It's likely you prefer one and you repress one. In the case of 3, 6, and 9, sometimes it's the same one. If you focus more on doing and feeling than on thinking, which doesn't mean, let me be clear at this point, we have the ability to do them all, or we can all do, we all feel, we all think. But if you focus more on doing and feeling than on thinking, you're probably a 1, a 2, or a 6. If you focus more on doing and thinking than on feeling, you might be a 3, 7, or 8. If you focus more on thinking and feeling than actually doing, you might be a 4, 5, or 9. If that helps you, think about how that is exhibited in your life. And also think about how that affects your relationships, especially if the people in your relationships are ones that focus on different things. So that might be a helpful way. Here's some more ways. We said we divided those groups by the repressed center, their least preferred center, right? We said 3, 7, and 8's not so much about the feeling. Well, Karen Horney discovered that there's some other things that those numbers, not just their least preferred center, have some things in common, which is why they sometimes look alike. More recently, I see that Suzanne Stabile is calling them stances. So again, don't worry about the names. But I find this part of thinking about your number is helpful, kind of delving into where you belong, where you fit, and how it feels, especially if you're just not sure yet about where you belong. If you thought, okay, I'm not any of these ones, but I might be a 1, 2, or 6, or if I might be a 4, 5, or 9. Let's see. Anyway, here's some ways you can divide them up and some things to think about. When I said some people call them stances, so 3s and 7s and 8s have an assertive stance. So this is how they get their needs met in the world. And they get their needs met by asking for their needs to be met. It says demanding. Well, it's sometimes demanding in an assertive way, but you can demand by just simply asking or making it happen, right? So in a group, they take charge or center stage for, in the case of a 3, for achievement, for fun in the case of a 7, or simply to be dealt with as an 8. But if they want something or need something, they just set out to get it, either by asking for it or making it happen, or just doing it. It doesn't occur to them that there are people out there in the world who don't do this. And so, if you're someone of the other groups that we're going to talk about in a minute, and you're in a relationship with a 3 or a 7 or an 8, it's a totally different way of thinking. 3s and 7s and 8s just can't imagine that if you need something or want something, that you just didn't set about to get it for yourself. I don't know if that made sense to you, but in my mind, I was thinking about some very funny situations. 4s, 5s, and 9s are totally the opposite. They are withdrawn, and so they get their needs met by withdrawing. So if what's happening is not something that is working for them for whatever reason, then they tune out or withdraw, or don't see themselves as a part of what's happening, or say, okay, well, we're done. I'm not going to participate in this anymore. Taking my ball and going home. If there's conflict, they just don't participate. They at least nines don't participate in conflict. Fours will be like, okay, I'll go and do my own thing. And then there are, and then there are ones, twos, and sixes who are compliant or dutiful. I don't know if that's a great name. Excuse me. I've been doing lots of talking here. But they get their needs met by earning what they need. And so when they're in a group, they find ways to be of service to others to get their own needs met. So in their own heads, they think, if I do this for you, you will do this for me. They don't say that out loud. That's just the way they operate in the world. They assume that if they are of service to you, then you will be of service to them. And how they get what they need in the world is not by demanding it or assuming that they deserve it, but by earning it. So if that kind of fits for you, you might be a 1, 2, or 6. So think about your own social style. Do you demand, do you earn, or withdraw in order to get your needs met? That might help you figure out and narrow down where you belong. Now, here's another way to divide up things. I also really like this. I think this also really helps you figure out where you belong, because there are patterns in how numbers look alike and how they respond to conflict and difficulty. And this, I think, is very helpful when it comes to relationships and how we react with each other, because it's so simple and so transformative in how I have related to people over the years. So something bad happens. What's the first thing you need to do? Well, there's 3 possible options. One is to say, okay, this isn't so great, but on the bright side, those are the positive outlook people. Those are the people who are the morale builders. They reframe disappointment. There is the competency group who say, okay, we can't think about that right now. We don't need to worry about our feelings. We say, what is the thing that needs to happen next? And then there's the reactive group that needs to share how they feel. Now, we all need to do all of these things. We all, whenever something bad happens, we need to figure out how we feel about it. We need to talk about how we feel about it. Yes, we do. We all probably need that in some way. We need to figure out what needs to happen next. And we need to figure out how to move forward to take another step in front of another. And we all need to find a way to find the good in a bad situation, to reframe the situation so that we can see the silver lining or the bright spot. However, it's interesting that these things are kind of like doorways or windows, and that for each of us, we can't get to the other 2 unless we've done the one thing first, or at least this is my experience and my observation. So for 9s and 2s and 7s, they cannot figure out what to do next. They can't talk about how they feel until they find the bright spot. For 1s and 3s and 5s, they cannot process feelings. They cannot reframe it until they figure out what needs to happen next. In a disaster, what do we need to do now? We'll figure out how we feel about it later. This is no good for the 4s, 6s, and 8s, who need to first talk about how disappointed they are or how they feel about it. They need to process their feelings. And once they can do that, then absolutely, they will figure out what comes next and they will find the bright spot. So this, it turns out, is a very different way of approaching like the negative things or the conflict or the difficulty in life. If you are in relationship with someone who is in a different group than you, well, then you can be like having trouble, because in this moment of difficulty, instead of supporting one another, you're trying to do opposite things. So one of you might be needing to share how you feel, and the other one is saying, we'll talk about feelings later. We just need to figure out what happens next. And if we know that these are like doorways or windows, and we know that we don't have those same responses, then we can allow for one another the thing we need as the doorway to open the door to allow us to do the next thing. So when things don't go your way, what is your tendency? How do you cope with disappointment? Are you part of that positive outlook group? If so, you're likely a 2, a 7, or a 9. Are you part of that competency group? Let's just figure out what the next step is. We'll do that, then we'll sort it out. Then you're probably a 1, 3, or 5. Or do you need to process your feelings about it first? And if you do, you're probably a 4, 6, or 8. Now, here's another way that people are connected to other numbers. Each of you, wherever you are on the Enneagram, has a relationship with the ones on either side of you. And we call those wings. So if you are a 1, you have a helper wing and you have a universalist or peacemaker wing. Most of us do not have an equal relationship with each of our wings. And apparently, I am told that that's our goal, is to try and have an equal relationship with our wings. That will help us in some of the stuff I'm going to talk about in a minute around development and growth. So I can tell you, for example, that as a 3 on the Enneagram, I have a very well-developed 2 wing, very developed helper wing, and do not have a very highly developed individualist wing. Not really at all. And so if I want to grow, I don't need to nurture my helper wing so much as I need to nurture my individualist wing. So if when you're trying to figure out where you fit on your number and you're thinking like I'm a 6 or a 7 or a 6 or a 5, that's quite possible because it's likely that you're one of those and that you have a wing, that you might be a 7 with a 6 wing or a 5 with a 6 wing. Yeah, use that to kind of help you narrow things down. And you put the wings together with some of the things we just talked about the positive outlook group or the stances or those kind of things. When you try and put those on top of each other, then you start to go, oh, because of the way I react in disappointment and because of the thinking, doing, or feeling thing, I had narrowed myself down to, and now like I thought it was a 7 or maybe a 7 or a 3 or an 8, but now I think I might be 6, 7. Well, the likelihood is you're probably a 7 with a 6 wing, right? Was that too complicated? You can rewind and go over that again if you need to. Here's another really interesting thing about the Enneagram. Is that you have a relationship with the numbers to which you're connected. I think I said that way back at the beginning of maybe the first video, that you have a relationship connect with those lines. That's what those lines are about. And so you see in this case, there's a little arrow on the lines, and that's to just help me talk about stress. So with each of these numbers, you see that one of them has an arrow. And most of us travel the direction of the arrow when we are in stress, when we are not having our best life, our best day. We might pick up the worst characteristics of those numbers that the arrow is pointing to. So if you are a 1 and you are completely stressed, you might pick up some of those worst characteristics of a 4. That, remember I said 4s know how to wallow? In one video I said that. 4s know how to feel sorry for themselves. And 1s, when they're in stress, they also know how to feel sorry for themselves. They can move into that woe is me, envy kind of feeling that really is not their type. But when life is just not working for them, they can pick that sort of thing up. 2s, who are very helpful Isn't it interesting that they are connected to 8s? When they are in stress, they can get bossy. I like to describe it as saying, when 2s are really under the gun and under stress, what they just get mad about people helping, and people should start helping how they want them to help. How could not everybody be helping in the right way? And so they can move to that kind of bossy place. 9s, when they are very stressed, move and pick up the worry and the fixation worry and anxiety of the 6. But because it's not theirs, it just becomes obsessive. And that's what makes 9s get overwhelmed. So anyway, you get the idea. We don't have to go through all the numbers here now, but just know that sometimes we can figure out where we belong in the Enneagram by what's going on in our worst moments. And in our worst moments, is there a number that is attached to our real number that sounds like us, and only in the bad ways? I say bad. I don't mean to be value driven about or judging about that, because again, we all do it. There isn't a good number or a bad number. We all just pick up some of those negative characteristics to the numbers that we are connected. So numbers can act the same for different reasons. We've talked about that a bit already. And so you may narrow down the options to a couple that don't seem to be the same. They can be connected. They might be lookalike types. Don't be discouraged by this. I know it's a lot of information. And so this information might make things more clear, or it might make things more confusing. It might make things overwhelming, or it might make things stimulating. That may also be connected to what number you are. Take your time, take a breath, go back and look at pieces at a time. Because once you feel like you get where you fit, there's so much you can do with it, but it might take a while. It might take hours, it might take days, it might take years for you to really situate yourself. However, once you do, I think you know that, yeah, you found yourself. So then once you do that, what do you do with it? Well, we've talked a bit about how much it can affect your relationship with other people if you understand that other people are actually different from you. I think it can give you some self-understanding, some self-acceptance. Some of us need some forgiveness about, we've been beating ourselves up for how we are, not understanding that it's actually a legitimate way of being in the world. It can help us understand our behaviors and accept other people and understand other people. It can also help us grow. So remember I said that there were some arrows that showed us about what happens to us in times of stress. Well, also, we're connected to 2 numbers on the Enneagram, aren't we? And the other number that we're connected to gives us a path to becoming more fully the people we can be, to kind of lift up some of that stuff we repress. So for a 4, for example, when they are stressed, they head to 2 and they try and help, but they don't help from an authentic place. They help because they think that they should be helping, but it's kind of all about them. And so it doesn't really work very well. But what 4s need to do when they are stressed, instead of, if they want to grow, is instead they move to 1. That's where they're also connected. And 1s do the right thing. They don't worry about whether it's about them. They do the right thing. And when 4s do that, suddenly their specialness, their authenticity, it just shines in the world. Now, I need to say that sometimes people use things as an excuse. So they think, oh, I'm supposed to go 6s. I'm supposed to go to 9 in my best space. And so sometimes they will use that as an excuse to say, so now I can have a nap or I can sit on the couch. When you're supposed to go to the other number, you're not supposed to go to the other number and pick up the worst stuff. I mean, you can do that. Sometimes we call that what security is, that we pick up some of the worst stuff of that and we and we get security from it. But your goal is to go to the other number and pick up the best things, because that will actually take you back to yourself and make you into the best 6 or 4 that you know how to be. I said earlier something about wings. It is said that if you can strengthen the wings on both sides and you can make them more equal, it helps you fly to the number of your growth. So that's another thing you can do with the Enneagram once you situate yourself and start to understand your own self a little more. Here's another thing we can do with the Enneagram. Every number on the Enneagram, I think, reveals and teaches us something about the characteristics of God. This particular chart comes from Cron and Stabile in The Road Back to You. And so there's a chart about how each of the numbers illustrates a characteristic of God, and how, in our worst moments, how we distort that characteristic and do not portray God. We do not portray that glory of God or that character of God in the world. In our best space, we might, but how we distort that is listed in the chart. So ones can reveal the goodness of God, but we distort it by becoming perfectionists. Twos can show the love of God, but distort it by becoming codependent. Threes can lift up the glory of God, but they distort it by promoting themselves instead of God. Fours lift up the beauty of God. Oh, let's pause. So in this chart, you can see that ones can show the goodness of God, but distort it by becoming perfectionists. Twos can lift up the love of God, but distort it by becoming codependent. Threes can lift up the glory of God, but distort it by promoting themselves instead. Fours can lift up the beauty of God, but distort it by becoming self-absorbed. Fives can lift up the omniscience of God, but distort it by becoming excessively detached. Six can lift up the character of the steadfastness of God, but distort it by doubting excessively. Sevens can lift up the joy of God, but distort it by avoiding pain. Eights can lift up the power of God, but distort it when they become vengeful or controlling. Nines lift up the peace of God, but distort it by avoiding conflict, because you don't get to the peace of God except going through the conflict. So if you're feeling discouraged and only noticing all the challenges of your number, remember the gifts of your type. There's listed a whole bunch of them right there. Some of the great things about each number, because as we noted, or as I have noted, there's no such thing as a best number. They're all just numbers. And it's how we live out of that number that makes us into the people we are. And it is my hope that the Enneagram can then help us become the people that we are created to be. So that's another look at the Enneagram for today. It's a lot of information. So if you need to go back and think through or read, you see behind me a bunch of some of the resources that I rely on and take a look at. And mostly the way I have learned the most about Enneagram is by talking to people about it. And in fact, I don't know if I've mentioned this in this one, but often there are podcasts that Suzanne Stabile and Ian Cron have a couple of podcasts out there that invite us to listen to people talking about themselves in relationship with their numbers. And that is often the way that you can learn. And then talking to other people about your experience of your numbers is really great. So that is Intro to the Enneagram Part 2. Will I do more of these? Maybe, but let's see if this is a helpful starting point. Thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions, be in touch and we can have conversation.